Welcome to the Mind Myself. It's not our podcast. This is our panel discussion with fantastic practitioners, and we're going to talk all about food, one of my favorite topics of all time. Food without the noise. And we've chosen that title because there's so much stuff online. There's so much stuff everywhere. And I can only imagine if you're at all like me, you might feel a little bit inundated. So thank you for coming here. We're going to try and make it still and conscious and non-salesy and no agenda except talking about what's real, what's true, what's healthy, and what makes us feel vital and alive. So that's my intention for this evening. And I know that our practitioners are going to introduce themselves shortly. But we have a few housekeeping items to get through first. So I always like to do a land acknowledgement, and I've chosen to shift that up over the last while. And I just want to acknowledge all the stewards of all the places where we live, the stewards of the air, the stewards of the water, the stewards of the land, and the stewards of our spirits. So I want to acknowledge all of those stewards and send all of us, whoever we may be, wherever we may be, and what epoch or era we live in, past, present, future. And I want to honor all the stewards. Mind Myself is a platform that I'm excited to bring to you. And our vision is to cultivate unity in a time of diversity and make holistic health information available to everyone around the planet, and especially to women in our late 40s and up. The women who are being told, there, dear, that's just how it is when you age. Never mind, take this pill and go away and suck it up. And sorry, but that's not good enough. So Mind Myself exists to be a place where you can find some answers, where you can find the questions to begin asking, and perhaps to find a practitioner who might help you. We have over 100 podcasts, 70 different healthcare approaches listed, so many different health issues presented, and practitioners, such as those you see on the screen here tonight, who may be able to help you. I want to share a couple of quotes, and these aren't specifically about food, but I think it lays the foundation for food. Dr. Gabor Mate says, when we stop trying to control the body, it often tells us exactly what we need. Exactly what we need. And Mary Oliver says there is a difference between information and understanding. Understanding takes time. So as we listen to this information tonight, as we engage in this conversation with each other, the practitioners here verbally and auditorily, and those of you who are speaking on the chat, we're all part of that information and understanding, and let it soak into our being. So with that, let us introduce ourselves. And I'm the founder of Mind Myself and the visionary for it. I didn't say that before, but that's who I am. And let's start with you, Sherry. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my background is as a chef and nutritionist. For many years, I branded myself as a food philosopher because I moved away from the nutritional reductionist mentality around food and nutrition to helping people understand how the healthiest cultures think and relate to food. And that led me to opening a cooking school in Melbourne, Australia, one in Vancouver. And then I moved into helping people beat primarily sweet sugar addiction and junk food addiction through a business called Sweet Freedom, and helping people with the mental, emotional, and spiritual side of why we eat what we eat, and relating that back to our relationship with food and our body and the planet. And most recently, I've moved into live blood microscopy and analyzing what's happening in people's blood and helping them move from, a terrain that's building the ripe environment for disease to a healthy terrain that is inhospitable to disease. So that's what's consuming me most lately, and working on something called the Clean Blood Protocol, helping to help people clean up their blood.
Thank you, Sherry. Sandra,
Recently, I have been working with something I call the spectrum of anger and the emotions that we experience. And food is a very emotional topic. There's a lot of things about food that where people get stuck and we eat emotionally and all those kinds of things. So I might have a lot to say about that. I have quite a bit of background in food and health and nutrition, though never as what I do. I've been a massage therapist, an energy healer, sound healer, human design, but never formally doing nutrition and food, but I still know a ton about it.
thank you. And yes, many of the resources that live in the resource section on Mind Myself come from Sandra's deep research, books and links and authors. Oh my goodness, so much to explore. Thank you, Sandra. Henry,
Hello. Well, I'm a certified chef and herbalist, nutrition coach, and I'm also certified in fermentation through Harvard. And so I love a lot of things about food. I love food, let's just put it that way. I love eating. I love traveling and doing food tourism and just getting to understand the roots of well, so much culture, right, is formed around the table. It's formed around food and the ingredients that people have accessible to them. And so when you really want to get to know people, you want to get to know what they're eating. And that's true as well in the nutrition coaching realm. Oh, I have health issues. Well, what are you eating? That's a huge part of it. It doesn't matter what supplements you're taking if your diet is not, you know, correlating, um, it says a lot. And so knowing what people eat regularly is really important for me as I'm coaching people.
thank you, Henry. Sarah,
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a animal and human classically trained homeopath. I've been practicing for the last 20 years in clinic, but more recently been involved in some scientific research on the gut microbiome and how that relates to our health and our animals' health. And I had some kind of aha moments where I decided that there was um, a missing bridge in the connection between soil health and our gut health, and our microbial communities are suffering because we are not integrating with natural ecosystems. So I decided to uproot myself and move to a farm. And I'm now starting a soil and regen project for animals and people, primarily with biodynamic growing of herbs and food for the community, and also probably a little bit more nationally at some point. So that's me.
thank you, Sarah. We've seen the place where you live on Facebook and a Facebook Live or whatever whatever that is.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing. It looks
Yeah,
just phenomenal. The potential is enormous. So
it is.
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's start off the questions with Sherry. I'd like to ask you this. In your work, how do emotional patterns and food become intertwined over time? You are muted. You're muted, Sherry.
Thanks. It can actually start in the womb. We can actually, when they've done studies of infants, they've shown infants that when the mother actually consumes sugar, babies will smile in the womb. And as we know, babies can experience trauma in the womb. We have generational and gestational trauma that a baby can have as it's forming. And when we come out into the world, and we face stress and pressure. We learn right from birth, especially if we're breastfed, that there's, hundreds of ingredients there that nurture us along with, the close contact with our mother's heart and breast. And also what can develop is when we don't have that, if we're formula fed, means we start out life disconnected from the breast and the heart of our mother and malnourished. And I refer to what happens with baby formula as the lethal recipe, where it's highly refined, sugars, oils, salts, grains, chemicals, things you'd never find in nature, completely deficient of what a newborn actually needs, even in good quality formulas. So as we grow up and we develop um, emotional issues, which, it's very rare to find a child that doesn't have some or the other. We can draw great comfort from the foods that we have. And in our childhood, we can be given treats and have certain things that where we make associations with certain food. A lot of kids, love dairy products because of the opiates in it and the absence of, having a breastfed um, beginning, and sugar again, it creates these spikes in blood sugar. I know as a child it was a very traumatic childhood, and sugar was my best friend. uh, and I've seen that with many clients. And one of the things I like to share with people is when we actually explore the emotional background and how we've come to seek comfort in foods is, uh, in a traditional culture, we just didn't have the luxury of doing that because in order to, have foods that were hard to obtain in nature, they were scarce. There wasn't sitting on a couch with a bag of chips and ice cream in traditional cultures. Those were, celebration foods. They were sometimes foods. They were very hard to obtain. And even then, they were natural versions of that. And so as we grow up and we develop comfort from the food that we're having, it can then, get out of control, as many people I'm sure can relate to. But one of the things I just like to leave people with or start with is to say, of all the drugs you've chosen to rely on and draw comfort from, this is the one that's least likely to kill you the quickest. So while it may be problematic on certain levels, um, there's a way to finding a way back to loving your body and loving yourself through food, not just through deprivation, but through actually exploring that which is truly nourishing to the mind, body, and spirit, and yeah, and soul.
Thank you, Sherry. And I see a lot of nods here from the practitioners. We may have diverging opinions, but I think we're going to have a lot of overlap tonight too. So, uh, Sandra, from your perspective, how does food interact with the biofield, not just the physical body?
Well, when working with the biofield or the energy field, personally, one of my primary skills is seeing what's happening with the energy and with the flow of the energy, or if energy is blocked and stuck. And it can be like a yes or no question. So anytime you put a food or a substance into the energy field or into the body responds to it. Oh, I like that, or ooh, that's a problem. And so sometimes foods are problematic, cause food reactions. There can be foods that have like emotional connections, either positive or negative. So all of those things independent of the food itself can cause energetic responses in the body. And then there's the food itself that can cause both positive responses. So it's just like if I am eating an apple and an apple is good for me, then my body's going to respond a positive response to an apple. If I am eating sugar, and it's like my body might get overreaction from the sugar overload, but ultimately it might have a shut down response. And then there's all of the emotions on top of it. So it can be very complex. And I think I said, when I was introducing myself, that eating is a very emotional topic. So there are so many layers on which I can answer that question. Pure nutrients, response of the body to the substance, response of the body to the emotions. Um, so there, we all have favorite foods as well, things that we really enjoy, whether we think they're good for us or maybe we think they're not good for us. And so all of those interact with the body and the energy field.
Thank you, Sandra. Sarah, let's move over to you. Why do lifestyle factors often matter as much as the food choices themselves?
Well, kind of my epiphany in the time that I've been working as a practitioner with, especially with animals, they can teach us sort of about that particular thing because they sort of demand uh, a certain type of lifestyle. And I'm more focused on species appropriate lifestyle. So if we're talking about people, that's very specific. And horses, dogs, cats, they all have their own needs. And I feel that one of the things that I teach, especially with horses, is that we can't really separate our environment from food because food actually comes from the environment. So if we separate the two things and we think that food just comes from the grocery store rather than, where we actually originally were eating from, which was the land and the other animals that inhabited that space and plants and the water systems, everything, we would integrate ourselves with that. So when we do that, we can't really separate the lifestyle conversation from the food conversation because the act of finding food and recognizing food that is healthy for us or good for us or tastes a certain way, is from a certain plant or whatever it is. The only way that we can do that is by exploring our environment. And through exploring the environment, we actually enrich so much more of ourselves than just our mouths, so our taste buds and our brain. So when we disconnect those two things, we can start to have, like Sherry was talking about, very dysfunctional ways of eating because we aren't connecting the food to the the world around us. And when we eat live living food that's fresh, that's harvested, immediately or the same day or even the day before, it's still alive. So it's a very different experience than eating uh, some lettuce from California that's in a bag and in plastic and been shipped and is by the time it gets to you, it's no matter how certified organic it is, it's still not the same as if you were to just grow a lettuce in a pot outside your house and eat from that, right? So the relationship that you have with the plants that you grow, even if it's some herbs on a deck, it's a pretty big difference. And I have such a love for my plants. I treat them like little children, and they bring me so much joy. So, and they feed me. So I really hope for people, and foraging is a whole other topic, but um, that's sort of how I think of food. So it is much more enriching in the way that you can connect yourself to things that are innate to your body, your energetics, your all of those things, right?
Thank you, Sarah. Henry, from a physiological perspective, what foundational element of nourishment is most often overlooked from your perspective?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question because I feel like it's all so interconnected. It's not like one or the other. But I would say hydration is so key from an absorption standpoint, as well as fiber. So we oftentimes think of food, and if we look at the average food that most people eat, it's low in fiber, and then we're not getting near enough hydration. So we're not able to actually filter out much. We're not able to detoxify properly. We're not able to absorb properly, and there's no place for the good flora in our gut to hang out. So it's just kind of empty. And so what ends up happening is and everybody feels bloated when they eat, right? And they're not processing it. There's inflammation in the face and in our joints and in the gut. And so hydration is so important for clearing out your system. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about detoxification because that's something that is missing that we don't actually think about. And I think most people go, oh, I'm going to detox at the beginning of the year. We need to be detoxing regularly, especially if you're eating processed foods, especially, you shouldn't be, but inevitably living in Canada or the US, you're going to end up eating processed foods on occasion. And so most diets from a historical standpoint, we look at multi generations into the past, both in North America, but especially Asia, even Latin America. Um, Very, very conscientious and understanding that food is medicine and really, really, really conscious about the liver detoxification from the standpoint of not having an overload of inflammation in the body. Um, so I would specify detoxification and eating bitter herbs and eating herbs in your diet as well that are full of the things that can help clear the toxins out of your body because we do live in a very toxic world, unfortunately. I agree with Sarah that, growing your own vegetables would be ideal. But for a lot of people living in urban areas or don't have a green thumb, that's not possible. So you're literally buying produce. And I love what you said, Sarah, about, by the time it might be an organic farm in California, but by the time it's gotten and been handled by everybody, from the garden to the truck to the trailer to the warehouse to the grocery store, the people assembling and the people who are handling it, it's already been so contaminated with parasites and you name it. So you have to be constantly in awareness of what you're putting into your body. There's many things that need to be taken out of the body. And so liver health is really key. Gut health as well. We'll talk about that a little bit because the microbiome is so important. But to me, hydration, if you're not going to look into the herbs that can help you detoxify, hydration is a great way to detoxify. So really take that water in.
Absolutely. And make sure you have your water with you. Everybody, let's take a sip together. Very important. And on that note, if you cannot grow your own food, there are local farmers that are probably close to you in urban areas. And Bill and I have done this for the last number of years and love it. We get it's called a community shared agriculture, or there might be other words for that acronym. And we get to choose what's in that box, and it comes from a farmer, and it's not all in plastic at all. And it's so fresh and so vibrant and so delicious. You can tell the difference, mirroring exactly what you all have been saying. And I could go on, but let's not. Sandra, what have you observed over time about how food choices affect people emotionally, energetically, or cognitively?
Which part of that question do you want me to answer? Oh my goodness. So,
Take a
um,
pick. You got 2 minutes.
yeah. So let's talk about foods that might not be beneficial for me and why I continue to eat them. Because there can be a lot of different factors in that, one of which is emotion. If I'm emotionally attached to something, it's going to be really hard to let it go. And a really common set of foods that this shows up for is a lot of people have a hard time with wheat and gluten, and yet it causes addictive responses. When it gets digested, it creates gluteomorphins. So these endorphin-like emotional substances that cause us to crave them. And then when companies who manufacture foods, they want us to buy these foods. And so they make them as beautifully delicious as possible, addictive. So it can be difficult for someone who may know they need to stop eating a food, but emotionally they can be attached to it. There's this addictive response. There's all the history associated with the food that can make changing foods very challenging. And I'm sure all of the practitioners here, agree with me in their particular areas. So it's like sugar. Oh my goodness, all of the emotions that can be attached to sugar. And do we eat meat or do we not eat meat? All these emotional questions that we get to navigate as beings striving to, optimize our health and feel good and happy at the same time.
Mhm.
So much. And again, we could probably talk for an hour or two just on that one question, all of us from our own perspectives. So feel free to weave that into your next answers yourself. Henry, when people say they feel overwhelmed by food advice, what do you think they're actually responding to?
Well, it's everywhere. So first off, if we look at just to paint the picture of a day in this world, right? So you're looking at commercials telling you to eat fast food, and then you're seeing pharmaceutical companies saying do this for that, and then you see articles on social media and on blogs saying eat this, don't eat this, and sometimes it contradicts things that you thought were healthy. I remember at one point there was this whole fad going out that eggs were unhealthy for you, so you should avoid eggs. But then it's like, no, eggs are actually healthy for you. Well, the reality is it's the type of egg you're eating. And this is where it gets overwhelming. You go to the egg aisle, and the vast majority of it is your caged chickens that are hormone laden and, literally have no room to move. And, you eat those eggs, yeah, probably not a lot of nourishment, nutrition. Those chickens are getting fed garbage, basically. And yet you look at, oh, it's organic, but it's caged. Well, it's not that great. Well, oh, it's organic, but it's cage free. Well, they're still in an enclosure with thousands of other chickens. Well, it's pasture raised chicken, but they're not organic, so they're feeding them non-organic feed. So where do you go? Technically speaking, you could spend $10.50 or $11 on organic pasture raised chickens, and that's probably the best option outside of local, if that's pasture raised organic. Uh, and it's costly. So even just that one example with eggs can feel overwhelming because we live in a buffet society with way too many options. And almost all of the options, by the way, are unhealthy for you if it's processed. Almost all. Even if we look at the standard of it's an organic product, but it's wrapped in plastic. Okay. It's hard to look at it and go, where can I go right? And there's like, oh, but this fish is really good. It's got healthy oils and omegas fats in me. Oh, it's great. But it's like in a it's in a can in aluminum, and so where do you go right and where do you go wrong? What I tend to lean towards, and again, there are seasons in my life when I do this really well, and there are seasons in my life, especially when I'm traveling or I'm in transition, where it's not as possible because you have to eat what's available to you. But the best route is ideally buying local from local farms, making your own food at home, and avoiding anything that's processed. That's the best thing to do. But for many people, that's overwhelming because number one, they don't like cooking or they don't know how to cook or they don't have access to that. So what do you do to make that work? And so the rule I kind of tell people is be merciful with yourself to an extent, but don't make so merciful that you keep on doing this to yourself. But if you follow that 70-30 ratio or 80-20 ratio, where 70 or 80% of the time you're doing what you need to do to be healthy, you can make exceptions 20 to 30% of the time, so long as you're also understanding that you need to clear that out of your system because so many of these chemicals that are in our foods are absolutely terrible for us and they stay lodged in our livers. So, like, you have to detoxify, as I was referencing to earlier. So, the reason it's overwhelming is because it is overwhelming. And reality is it's a lifestyle. And to do this properly, it's baby steps. One thing and another thing. I remember at one point when I was eating very unhealthily, years ago. I ended up with cancer twice, actually. And after the second time of having cancer, I was like, I have to be much more careful with what I eat. And I took baby steps. I introduced fermented foods. I stopped eating white flours or processed flours. unless it was Italian. I was making sourdough bread if I did eat flour. Otherwise, I avoided it. I eliminated sugar from my diet. I ate only organic, non-GMO. But it wasn't like I did that overnight. It took me about a year and a half to get to the point where I was eating to the level that I actually think is right to eat. And I kept researching and learning by trial and error. And ultimately, it came down to how do I feel when I eat this way? Because sometimes when people say, "Oh, this is amazing," is not necessarily great for me. For one, I don't have a gallbladder. And so, as a nutritionist, when I'm talking to people about their health, I want to know the full gamut of their health history because what works for me might not work for someone else with their body, depending on what they have going on in their systems and what age they are, and if they're male or female or pregnant or not pregnant or nursing. There's so many factors that have to be considered. So that was my long answer. But we live in a buffet society where there's too many options and we don't know which one's right. That's why it's overwhelming.
Excellent. And there is support. Should you need, there is support. Should you desire, there is support. And I love that. I think everyone is saying this one thing at a time, but keep moving. Don't just do one thing and then scrap it and go on to something else. Do one thing, trial and error, see how you feel, and keep moving along. Sherry, let's see here. What are the subtle signs that food has shifted from nourishment into control or coping?
Well, I think the first sign is when you're eating when you're not hungry. Most of us in North America have not really known real hunger unless we've done a fast, a serious fast. But the first sign is that you're eating, you're eating for comfort. You're not hungry. You're starting off the day with foods and rituals that help you cope with life. I mean, how many people have a cup of coffee at work to avoid the fact that they're doing work that is killing their soul? And maybe it's more than coffee. But to give you an example of my journey, I used to be twice my size, so not 10'4". Haven't had a massive height reduction. I was starting off the morning with half a liter of Sara Lee ultra chocolate ice cream, and I did not stop eating until I was in a sugar coma, going to bed. But each moment of the day, I was thinking about what I was going to eat next. So I'm literally eating lunch, thinking about what I was going to eat for dinner. I wasn't even present for it. I always had to have something in my bag, to nibble on or eat on. At the kind of the worst of it, I was a chef and I worked during the day at an academic ladies club in Melbourne, and I would be eating leftovers from lunch on my way home, and then I would actually make a 2 or 3 course meal for my husband, and we would have wine with it, and yeah, and I literally didn't stop eating until I went to bed, and I would wake up, and even if I'd had 10 hours of sleep, I never felt I didn't feel well rested because my body was in a sugar coma digesting when it should have been resting. So I think deep down, we all know when we move past that point. And for the most point in North America, very few of us are actually eating for nourishment alone. But there's many reasons why we eat. We don't just eat for nourishment. I don't believe that food is just medicine. I believe that food can be medicine and poison, but it can also be something that we take great pleasure in. We can have spiritual experiences while we're eating. When we break bread with one another, even if it's not sourdough organic,
But
something,
hopefully it is.
yeah, something happens when we share a meal. And there's something also that happens. What I noticed over the years is that if you were having a glass of wine and someone was just having a sparkling mineral water, there was almost like this disconnect. If being in with your addictive substance, there was like a disconnect, and there's a societal pressure like, oh, what are you, too good for us, or you're being good, or that kind of thing. Where when we're making actually truly loving choices for our bodies, if someone else is not making that loving choice and they see you doing that, it becomes a mirror for their own behavior. That is, if they're indulging in something addictive, that can then, in some cases, cause people to be even more anxious, drink or eat more of the wrong food. So there's lots of ways to actually determine whether we're moving from nourishment into a coping mechanism. And we all kind of deep down know it, uh, but our body will also be experiencing health issues when we're doing that. And it will speak to us softly, and then it will speak louder, and then it will yell at us in the form of disease, to really get our attention if we're ignoring it and not listening.
Absolutely. I believe our everything that happens to us and everything we do and everything we think is all part of us and it's all in us. And if we don't listen to the whispers, then we're going to have to listen to the shouts because it's going to shout to us eventually. So why don't we start sooner is my question. Sarah, over to you. How does the nervous system state influence how the body responds to food?
That's a good question. Um, well, I can tell you that, because I work with animals so frequently, especially horses in particular, their nervous systems are very tuned into finding food and uh, foraging and seeking out food whilst being a prey animal, whilst looking for danger. So we are sort of wired a little bit the same way. I think Sherry kind of talked a lot about this in the beginning of how our traumas kind of live in our bodies and how our taste buds, our eyeballs, all of these things are pre our eyes. There's that saying like our eyes digest our food, we taste it before we actually taste it with our eyes, and our eyes are the outside tissues of our central nervous system. So we actually do have this huge emotional, neurological response to specific foods. And it's very interesting to think of it in relation to animal behavior versus our behavior, because we are animals, but um, I really like observing them because we've we kind of override that part for ourselves, and sometimes we're very unconscious when we're eating. Sherry talked about that too, where we maybe are eating when we're not hungry, or we're eating things over and over again that maybe we've kind of shut down how important that is emotionally to us versus whether or not it's nourishing or creating balance and nutrition, like full nutrition in our diets. So there is that part of you that I think, as you're, if you're in the wellness space where you're seeking to shift your diet and you're seeking to, eat better and incorporate more quote unquote healthy foods, how do you even do that? And one of the things you can do is use that intuitive part of yourself. So some people aren't very connected to that because they have trauma and they don't want to listen. And I know a lot of people can relate to that, and that's a great thing that you can do with food because everybody needs to eat. And so when we slow it down and we observe how we feel, to take a moment before we actually start our meal, or choose a food at the grocery store, or however you're finding your food, um, to really feel what you feel like as you put that in your basket or put that on your plate. And just kind of start with that, because I think a lot of people, if they started there, it would unbreak a lot of those blockages that we have with pathological eating, I guess you could say, or eating that maybe not be healthy for us. So, and that's a, feeling into your nervous system as you're interacting with your food, no matter what it is, if it's processed or the freshest thing ever.
Thank you, Sarah. There's so much value in stillness. And in this rush, rush, hustle, bustle world, taking time. And I love that imagery that you've given of when you hold something, just feel it. Take a moment to think about it, breathe in with it. And we can't do that with everything, obviously, but and when we're sitting down to a meal, we used to pray. We did. I don't know how you grew up, but we used to say a prayer before our meals. Well, there's something to that stillness, whatever your beliefs or values are, but to take a still moment and be grateful and feel the resonance. I think that's a really, really good image. Henry, I'm going to move back to you, and I have a kind of a two-part question. When someone is eating well but not feeling well, what are the common signs that someone is not absorbing or utilizing what they eat, and what does that look like?
Well, I often have people define to me what does eating well mean to them because a lot of people think they are eating well, but reality is oftentimes they're not. And so I think that's a really key component. Uh, Gut health is so important. So like 90 to 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut.
Mm,
50% of dopamine is produced by gut bacteria. 80% of your immune system is gut related. And so gut is so important when it comes to really having optimal health. I would say for an answer in part to that question, when it comes to the component of I'm eating well, but I still don't feel well. Um, Generalizing, because there's always very specific things going on in people's bodies. Parasites is a huge part of it. And most people have parasites. Almost everybody on the planet has parasites. And I know we don't like to think about that, but if you have pets in your home, or if you probably have parasites. If you have children, you probably have parasites. If you are taking produce and not washing it properly, that's not from your own garden and land, and it's being handled by lots of people, probably getting parasites. And so parasites are terrible long term. You can have parasites chronically, and it can affect your mood, it can affect your energy. So I really recommend looking into that and then being very mindful about hand washing and also the cleanliness of your food. That is one thing. The other thing that I would say is that everybody's body is a little bit different, um, especially in different stages of life. Okay. Uh, as we get older, it can be harder and harder for us to reduce inflammation in the body. Okay. And so inflammation of the body is a huge component of people feeling unwell and having that dis-ease because we feel sluggish, we feel bloated, we feel inflamed, we feel exhausted. And so there are foods that, although they could be organic per se, and healthy, supposedly, can be very inflammatory in the body, depending on who it is. Nightshades would be an example of that. And so, although some people can eat nightshades and seem to be fine, some people can't. I, for one, anytime I eat white flour, it doesn't matter if it's organic, if it's flour, and it's not from Italy, I almost always get inflammation and really in my face and my joints. My body doesn't like it. So it could be like, oh, but I was eating organic flour and it was, I thought it was good. Well, it still didn't affect me well. And so I think that you need to be listening to your body. And this is what I would say to that is as you're eating, and if you're trying to eat the healthy things, see how you're feeling after you've eaten it. And if there's something that doesn't quite work well for you, eliminate it. The next time you eat that same meal, maybe you pull out the dairy and do that same meal without the dairy and see how you feel. Or try having something without the flour for a bit. Go a week or two without eating any flour products. And how do you feel if it's gluten free? How do you feel after 2 weeks of eating no dairy? Because sometimes we eat things long term that we think, oh, it's been normal. It's how I feel normal. And then you take it out of your diet and you're like, I suddenly have energy. I feel really good. I didn't realize I could feel this way. And so that's what I just think, be monitoring your body and listening to yourself. And this is an exercise that I think you can ask yourself intuitively. Your body actually has a lot more knowledge than you give it credit. So ask yourself, should I eat this? And what's the first instinct that you have when you have it? Should I or not? If you have a little check in your gut that nope, I shouldn't eat that, maybe avoid it, you know? And so there's just listening to yourself can be very, very important and monitoring it over time.
So much to say and respond to. The key piece I want to pull out of there is gluten free does not mean switching flour for some other crap processed
Mhm.
thing that is
Yeah.
labeled gluten free and then makes you feel okay. Like just to
Mhm.
put that in there. Yes, but maybe it's just removing the flour for a while. So I just want to add that to the conversation. Sarah, I'm going to move back to you because it's the next question is along these lines. What do you notice in people who are eating well but still feel depleted?
Well, I find that that goes sort of back to the stress conversation and the nervous system conversation. We can have, I tell my clients all the time, we can have the best diets on earth. We can do all the things. We can eat all the organic and all the fiber and all the things. But if we are working in a job that we hate and we are not happy on a daily basis, when we're putting energy into things that take a lot of effort and emotional and energetic energy out of us, it is very hard to refuel, and it doesn't really matter how healthy your diet is if that part isn't addressed. And I do find that, I think someone mentioned at the beginning, we have quite an attachment to food. We can create control around food. And that's something that, as a practitioner, I always check in to make sure that we are having a good baseline there. Because if we're not having a good baseline there, then we can, um, run into what's called in homeopathy an obstacle to cure. It's like if someone smokes, it's an obstacle to, if you really want to be like really healthy, at some point you're going to have to find a way to stop doing that. So I think that, emotionally, we definitely have, um, we have to check in with how we're, uh, even if we are eating the best diet ever. Why are we doing that? Are we getting neurotic about it? Are we, um, I find that that can be kind of an issue as well, and people do that with their pets as well. They, feed them the best stuff, and they're all researching about their pets, and they feed them raw, and they do all the things, and they have 18,000 supplements, and they spend $550 a month, and but they're not healthy. They're not doing the same thing for themselves, and there is a dysfunction in that. And there's an elephant in the room all the time with that conversation, because that piece is hard to touch without upsetting people, but it is something that we all deal with. So it's, no matter, that perfectionism of, and it gets worse as we see all these overwhelming inundations of, what we should be doing and what's the newest science on this supplement and biohacking and all of these things that are getting to us somehow, and almost even that is creates stress, especially when we don't know what to do with it. We can form shame spirals around not being able to do all of those things. So it really comes back around to, like, Henry said at first, like, you don't do it overnight. you change one thing at a time, and you navigate through observation. Observation is your best friend. So if you feel really good after you eat something, then maybe keep a journal and note that, wow, I felt really good this day and I was eating these things. And then over time, you might be able to see a pattern. But again, it's very simple. If we're talking about this food with no noise, um, conversation, we have to really, you know, get rid of the noise and even our own noise surrounding food. Like there's so much guilt and shame, and I shouldn't be eating this, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing that. And as soon as you start to get into that, it starts to create stress. And then you might just eat something really sugary and just to calm yourself down and just say screw it.
Not that any of us have ever had that experience before,
Right.
ever, right? Not none of us have ever had that.
So yeah, so I think that you do really need to just, like Henry said, be kind to yourself, but also be honest with yourself.
Thanks, Sarah. Sandra, I'm going to move over to you too. It's really interesting how these questions are flowing. You describe yourself as both an intuitive, and I've seen that in you, and a scientist or scientific. How do you bridge lived experience with data when it comes to food and nutrition and this whole emotional minefield?
I'm going to answer this question by addressing what Sarah and Henry and overall we've been talking about and the animal question. Okay.
Perfect.
So when we are allowed to find our what I'm going to call natural diet, what feels right without any pressures, without any influences, and allowed to instinctively go for the food that's right for us. That's what I'm going to call our natural diet. And I think it's attainable in the modern world. We have Bill and Esther here, and as far as I'm concerned, I think they have about as natural, a balanced, easy, instinctive way of eating of anybody I've ever met. So I know it's attainable in modern life. Okay. Being able to look at all of the food options available and then based on how I feel and what my sense is I need and how I respond to the foods, make my food choices accordingly. So if you ever get an opportunity to eat with these two, it's an amazing experience. It's that natural feeling way of eating. Now let's bring in the animals in the question, okay? I'm not going to answer exactly Bill's question, but kind of close, okay? So I'm not going to answer it for horses because I don't know for horses, but I do know an example about cows. Okay. I know a lot about regenerative agriculture where animals, grazing animals like cows, are allowed to, using portable electric fences, graze at will, however they want to eat in an area, and then they get moved to another area. And when you allow the plant material to just grow up naturally, there's a wide variety of foods in that pasture. And you put a bunch of cows in there, there's plenty for them to eat. They will pick and choose the individual plants that each animal needs at that time. And they might need eat one forb one time and another kind of grass another time based on their instinctive sense of what they need. They may eat completely different plants today than next week. And by giving them that full menu of all of the different plant materials in that field, you allow them the freedom to, as their body knows it needs, choose those plants. We have the ability to do the same thing. They've done studies with young children, and they just give them free rein to eat any time of day they want. They make all of the food options available. And sometimes these small children one day a child might go and have liver. Something that we adults think, oh, they wouldn't want that. But because the child is allowed to have their natural instincts and choose the foods based on the frequency of the foods, how they enjoy the foods, the taste, the flavor, and how their body responds, and they eat when they want, however much they want, without any outside adult generated forces influencing it. We all have the ability to eat naturally in that same way. And how do we accomplish that? One choice at a time, right? So, like we've all been talking, how do I feel about this? Do I want this or not? How do I respond? And then make adjustments as I go. Getting closer to the point that Bill and Esther have this, like, it's extraordinary witnessing someone living that natural food way. So we each get there one step at a time, however much progress we make. I hope I answered your question, Esther.
Thank you. That was fabulous. So, and thank you for that acknowledgement. We love the way we eat and we love our food. And at the moment, Bill and I are exploring the Wild Fit 90-day journey again. And we're right now in what they call deep spring. And sometimes it takes clearing of so many of the things that we normally ingest in our body to remember again what it does. And I've been in resistance. We're in a low carb phase. And my 2-year-old was having a tantrum the other day. I can't live this way. And someone confronted me and said, well, that's not you talking, that's your gut bacteria talking. And I went, oh, right. It's not me. And I don't have to live that way forever. But it's really good to put myself in this place regularly because then it can clear space for those instincts to return because I think they've been squished out of most of us. So Sherry, I'm going to bring it back to you and ask, so how do you, and you're so good at this, how do you support people in rebuilding trust with food after years of struggle or rigidity?
Well, I think I think of the words building trust and sometimes rebuilding the trust within yourself is also looking at the ways you betrayed yourself, your own trust over the years, and helping people to move back with that grace and forgiveness, um, and learning to not be perfect and being okay with not being perfect and moving to the place of listening to their body and also understanding, like your 2-year-old. There's different parts of our body that speak to us. I remember many years ago in Australia, this woman, when I was giving a lecture, she said, yeah, this morning I was listening to my body and my body said I just needed to start the day with a Mars bar and a Coke. I was like, well, that is listening to your body, but that's the addictive responses of your body. That's not the part of you that actually wants to be nourished. And when I work with people, I do an 8-week program called Sweet Freedom to get people off of sugar and junk food. And I don't get people to change their way of eating apart from just upgrading their choices of everything they're having until week 5. And week 4, people are often saying, this is actually a self-love program because they're expecting a diet program. It's not a diet program. And so that the process is helping people to understand that often our physical choices, where we've betrayed our trust, come from the mental, emotional, and spiritual choices we've made. And I get people to work on extracting the toxicity within their life mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Because when you do those things and you start to nourish mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, making changes in the physical by removing the things that are toxic and addictive and replacing them with nourishing things becomes so much easier when those other quadrants of our life are actually nourished and we're not poisoning ourselves. And when it's a slow process, like everyone here has said, it's one step at a time or one thing at a time. It is a process, and like I have a program starting again next week, and we have people who've done the program 3 and 4 times because they get that it's a process. Like you doing Wild Fit, it's not your first time. There's levels and layers that we uncover each time we start to do the work.
Absolutely. And Sherry's Sweet Freedom program is fantastic. It's an 8-week program. Bill and I have done that too. I mean, there's so many levels of learning. I feel like Every season, I'm learning something new, sometimes every moment. So, highly recommend Sherry's program too. Henry, I'm going to come back to you. How do you help people distinguish between short-term dietary strategies and long-term nourishment?
Yeah. Well, I think foundationally, I would want to mention that I don't like anything that's short-term mindset for weight loss or any of that. This is about lifestyle change as opposed to a short-term fix. But with that being said, on the short term, what I typically tell people who come to me to get healthy, and it doesn't matter what it is, really, in this case, there's three things I say eliminate this right off the bat: alcohol, any sugary drinks, okay, and flour. Those three things I find consistently, if they eliminate, or if they're eliminated from the diet, and although for many people that's hard because I want my soda, I want my wine, I want my bread, or I want my pastry, or I want my donut, or whatever it is, the comfort things, right? It's like, it can be very hard. But if you eliminate those three things from your diet, you will lose weight pretty quick, and your inflammation will go down significantly. And you're also allowing your gut not to be under duress and distress so much because those three things can be very, very difficult in the gut in and of themselves. And so if you eliminate that, you're actually doing yourself a service. So when we look at anything with health and wellness from the food intake standpoint, there's health by what you put into your body. There's health by what you eliminate and not put into it. And there's also health in terms of what you are putting into your body to help the body do what it's supposed to do naturally. You had mentioned, Sarah, about liver, or I think it was Sandra, sorry, about liver, and how, most kids wouldn't think to eat liver. Well, you know, throughout generations, we ate the offal, the organs, all of it. We need those organs in our body, actually. We need to consume them for our hormonal health, for many, many, many purposes. We basically eat like chicken tenders and most, ground beef. It's like the stuff that's packaged and ready, but back in the day it was you ate everything and you kept the bones and you made the bone broth and you ate the whole animal, which is what our body needs. And so one thing I'd like to kind of actually this Esther, I'm going to throw this at Sherry if that's okay, because I
Sure.
think this is really something I want Sherry to share about the whole idea of the seasonality and the whole component of the way you have an acronym you use. I think it's really, really good. But the key, I think, is really looking at short term, eliminate the things out of your diet that you shouldn't be having, and then long term, incorporate the things your body actually needs to function as the machine that it is. You wouldn't put windshield washer inside where the oil goes in your car. Okay, so you have to understand why you're eating what you're eating and what it does for your body. And think about your body as a beautiful ecosystem and an amazing machine that if you give it the right things, it helps the whole function instead of putting things in that cause it to be in constant stress mode.
Thanks, Henry. And I was going to go to Sherry next anyway. Just before we go to you, Sherry, let's everybody shake your hands, move your body, take a sip of water, do a little stretch because we've been sitting for over an hour now and we all sit too much. So if you need to stand up and move around, do a little chair dance, different than a lap dance. And then let's come back and share, yes, what's your process? And maybe as part of your answer, self-compassion. What is that role? Carry on, Sherry.
Well, I'll just quickly mention the acronym that Henry referred to is SLOW. And I actually borrowed that. I borrowed that from Professor Mark Cohen in Melbourne. He came up with it, but I've exploited it. Seasonal, local, organic, and whole. And here's the thing, if you eat that way, you know, literally your life, your food life will come into balance if you eat seasonally, locally, organic, and whole. Although that's trickier depending on where you live on the planet. But as far as compassion goes, I think I probably answered it a bit in my last question,
Mhm.
and the grace, forgiveness, and not trying to be perfect. I think is the big thing. And the analogy of the tortoise and the hare, that our whole diet mentality and the world we're living in is reductionist, and it's very much based on the hare. Let's lose weight quick, whatever, Ozempic, whatever it takes. Whereas the tortoise usually wins the race, and it's the slow, consistent things that we do daily that we either eliminate daily or do daily and consistently, and having a long goal in mind is that the finish line, uh, to me, it's not so important. Crossing the finish line is having a really good race and doing it properly and enjoying, so you're not just so consumed either with, the weight loss thing or being so healthy. I'd love to see how many of you know people who are so obsessed with being healthy that they're really unhealthy, right? Yeah. Um, and so having this long term loving, I just want to enjoy the journey through doing this. And if I just pick one thing, I'm going to do right today. And I'm going to really focus on that because we all know what you focus on expands, which is why I try not to focus too much on my ass and hips. Um, but if we are focusing on what we're doing wrong all the time, we're likely going to do more of that. And if we focus on and really celebrate and honor when we're actually making these decisions that are, beneficial to us and that are self-loving, we're going to do more of that. It's really that simple.
Thanks, Sherry. Sarah, can you carry on in the sustainability theme and how would someone maintain this over the long haul?
Hmm, good question. So I guess it depends on where you live, and kind of what your goals are. I personally have a big goal. My new farm is called Rewild Canada or Rewild Farm Canada. And my goal with that project is to not only help to rewild, you know, a space, a piece of land, but also in the process of that, I'm going all the way and trying to do that for myself as well. And not that's it sounds extreme, but it is my life choice is that that's how I want to live. So you can go anywhere in between there and being super duper duper unhealthy. And wherever feels, it's sort of like choosing a food, like wherever feels really comfortable at this moment, maybe that will change and that's okay. But I have experienced some pretty severe health things in my life, and I got tired of feeling sick and tired. So I was not a healthy person in my younger life, and I still feel like even though I've been really working at it for, the last 20 years, that, there's still blockages that need to be shifted, and this was my solution for myself to do this. But um if you're living in a city, it can be a lot harder um, to obtain that sort of seasonal, local, organic everything without breaking the bank. So I don't know where everyone's from, where everyone lives, but here in BC, we have some really great CSA programs, which is what Esther was talking about, where you can connect with a local farmer or a farmer's co-op, which is a bunch of different local farmers that go together in on produce and possibly meat as well. And places like Spud, which is a big thing in all of Canada now, I think, where they get kind of um, large amounts of organic produce that's kind of left over from, that may not be sold otherwise. They've got lots of it at certain times of the year, lots of seasonal stuff. And because they don't have that, Whole Food storefront, they have quite a bit of a discount on food. So it's a great way to, and they also deliver, which is even more exciting. So there's lots of places, and I've worked a lot with the Young Agrarians, which is another nonprofit here in Canada that matches regenerative farmers with landowners, so that even if we don't have the money to have our own land, we can share with somebody, and they support all of these systems, the CSA programs, all of this kind of stuff. So Young Agrarians is a great tool to, they have tons of resources for where you might be able to locate local farms and regenerative farms, organic farms in your area, if you live in Canada. And I'm sure there are similar programs in the US. There's a lot of really great farms in the US as well. I've seen some in Australia. I've seen some in the UK. Really, really, really beautiful places. So um, even if you can't do that all the time, if you can subscribe and get a box every week, and then you do your local shopping as you need, that is a big, 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 big deal. And then you're also getting a lot of rotation, a lot of variety, which is kind of keystone to a healthy diet, is a lot of rotation in your food intake, and not just eating one thing all the time, because you can't create balance through it's the same thing I teach with dogs and cats. You can't feed them out of a bag and it's not balanced and complete. It's just not. So you definitely need to switch it up, and seasonal and local is a great way to do that.
Thank you. And I used to work in the pet food industry, which is how I met Sarah.
Yes.
And if spraying on fake vitamins doesn't make it complete and balanced, and you open the bag and it all oxidizes away anyway. So no, just no. Sandra, your contribution on this, and there's a question that was in the chat. Does even healthy non-fluoride toothpaste destroy our mouth microbiome? Can you comment on that?
Non-fluoride is definitely going to be better. And if there is glycerin inside the toothpaste, then it coats your teeth and it keeps your saliva from accessing your teeth. So it's better to have a toothpaste that does not have glycerin. And most of the commercial pastes out there have glycerin. I think we talked about this, Esther. There are other forms, so there are powders, there are other liquid formulas that you can get. I believe what my husband uses is earth paste, and I think it doesn't have glycerin. So there are a few options out there, but glycerin is seen to be a safe ingredient for the more natural toothpaste. So I keep an eye out for it and don't buy those.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on that toothpaste conversation?
I used earth paste and I was very, very disappointed they discontinued the cinnamon flavor. So I literally have a little bit left in my tooth in the tube, and yeah, I've looked all over. It's gone.
It
So
is gone, and I agree with you.
I
That's so funny.
am not sure if you've ever heard of Living Libations, but they do some great um, oral healthcare stuff. She's an herbalist. She's in Ontario, and she does have a lot of cinnamon things. I am not good with cinnamon, so I don't enjoy it, but she makes for both people who can do it and people who can't. So she might have something for you.
I, I
That's
saw
great.
I saw a post somewhere and someone said no one likes cinnamon toothpaste.
No,
And it was like, that's not true.
only a few people.
That's what I have with me on this trip is cinnamon. It's like
That's
so
so
good.
great.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's great. We have another couple questions in the chat. So, and this was directly to you, Sarah from Bill. Can you actually tell the difference in a horse's behavior and overall digestion when feeding them different, better hay, grass, etc.? And I think you kind of answered that earlier. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, because horses have this enormous hindgut fermentation system, it's like a times 1,000 of what we have in our bodies. Their gut microbiome is enormous, and their gut brain, like their vagus nerve is enormous. It all ties into that, and so they one of the major problems with them is gastric and hindgut ulcers, and also a lot of colic, which is deadly for some horses. So um, we can see generally behavior changes before we see the if we scope them and we look inside their GI system. And that's one of the things that I'm working on, and I think it's going on in the human space as well. Is trying to create less. Oh, that's my dog. Sorry.
I wondered who that was.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thanks, Rowan. Okay, that's very funny. She has this, I don't know what kind of dog, but very, very regal dog, Rowan. Just
Sorry about that.
burping away or farting.
It's like kind of distracting. So yeah, creating more less invasive solutions to figuring out what is actually going on in there. And we a lot of people suspect that their horses have problems because of their behavior, and we know from human studies that anxiety and depression and all of these things, like Henry was saying, that your serotonin and your dopamine is largely created by a healthy gut microbiome. And so, yes, we can definitely see that mirrored with basically almost all animals. You can see it in dogs, aggression in dogs that have serious gut problems. We also see like separation anxiety disorders, where people can't leave their dogs at home without them destroying the entire house or screaming all day, or because their owners leave them. And so very similar things. And there's a lot going on in that space. And the more we can get a grip, the hard part is that to get a grip on what a healthy microbiome actually is, which has been my challenge with this research that I've been doing, is that we don't actually have that baseline. And I beg to argue that we don't have it for humans either. We have a lot of information, but we don't have enough. And so my go-to is always to swing back to ancestral practices, whether it's dogs, horses, humans, whatever. So I'm really into studying indigenous cultures, and studying what wild horses eat, what wolves eat, what the big cats. I'm obsessed with big cats and worked with lots of them. So even though that's not 100% scientific, it doesn't make sense not to add that part to the equation, because we can go on forever with every science paper that ever exists, like forever, and we're still not going to know all the answers through science, because science is so compartmentalized. It's, and it's, our culture has become so focused on, if there's not science attached to it, then it's bogus and it's stupid and it's not real. And to an extent, like, I love science. I'm a total science geek and I love reading really good science, but there's a lot of really bad science going on as well. Science with agendas, we should say. And
Not, yeah,
that's not fun.
nobody here would know that, but
Yeah,
hey.
right. So I would say that that would, you know, g making it simple again, going back to like where stopping all the noise and going back to like, okay, well, even I've been sort of interested in my ancestry where I, is in European ancestry, Celtic ancestry, like what were these people eating? And how do I feel when I eat that stuff? So it's kind of an exploration, but goes back to that intuitive part where yes, we know, we have an idea of what what we're supposed to be doing. And it doesn't need to be as hard or in a box and compartmentalized as it has been. And I think that's how it gets to be so overwhelming. Um, and I think if you're integrating locally with your food, that is one of the biggest things you can do, even if it's not every single solitary thing that you eat. When you choose honey, make sure you get it from a local place because then it will actually be integrating you with the environment if you can't be out in the environment. If you're in a job where you're in an office all day, like try to incorporate things that come from your local environment because your cells and your microbiome can actually integrate and work with that, even if you're not physically there.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a great way to finish off your little piece of this evening. Sandra, what would you like to leave us with this evening?
Make your own food. You're much more likely to get food that really suits you and helps you be healthy if you start with basic ingredients and make the food.
And you can do it strategically. We sometimes feel, and it's not the optimal thing. You should cook fresh every day, but not everybody can. So make it in batches, freeze it, or have it for a couple of days. And Henry's saying, no, don't do
No, I'm
that.
saying yes, do it.
Okay, yes.
And
Make it easier on yourself. Do things that support you in your life and make it yourself. Yes. Carry on,
and you
Sandra.
you can change one thing at a time. Because it can be overwhelming listening to us say, oh, do this, do that, do this. And it's like, I can't do that, which can have you do nothing. So, out of all the things you heard tonight, pick one that's like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me try that. And try one thing at a time. And then see how it feels. And maybe adjust it or keep it up a little bit and then switch to something else. Oh, I didn't really like that, but then try something else. You had so many ideas here tonight. And so just start incorporating them.
Thank you, Sandra. Sherry, what would you like to leave us with?
Excuse me. I would say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So find your tribe, find your coach. You're not implementing because you don't have enough information. We are drowning information. And so try and find the person to coach you and the group to find that support that resonates with how you think and feel in your gut. And that the healthier your gut is, the easier that is. The unhealthier your gut is, the harder that is. Um, but to think of this as a long-term tortoise journey, and crossing the line is not about quantity, it's about quality. So you find your tribe, find your teachers in your tribe. And for me, I'm not attached to who you find. I'm more attached that you actually just find your way.
And here's the thing, and before we get to you, Henry, it doesn't have to be onerous. I think, and I can only speak for myself really, but I have had so many failures just right up front. And I know Sandra's given us big kudos, but I've had so many failures and felt so crappy about myself. And I ate too much. I did whatever, my thyroid, what, all the things. Pick them. trauma from my past. I was a chubby little kid. There is so much shame around body and weight and size and all of it. So I want to ditch that. In some moments I'm more successful than others, but they can be fun. Like food can be fun too. So let's bring fun back into it and joy and the tingling taste buds and the mouthgasms, as somebody said to me. Like just food can be so fabulous. So I just wanted to put that in there too here. And Henry, take us home before my little outro here.
Sounds good. Well, I want to piggyback on everybody's comments and agree with all of them, especially the fun part, because food is fun. And actually, when you start to do this lifestyle of eating well and taking care of your body, it is very, very, very fun. And so here's a couple of tips I'll give you guys, for especially for those who maybe don't enjoy cooking as much or feel they don't have as much time to cook. So typically, what I do when I have four daughters, okay, so when I cook is I'll make a large meal for dinner, and I always make enough for leftovers for lunch and enough for me to freeze some and put it away for the rainy day when I don't feel like cooking and I don't want to have to order a pizza or something like that I shouldn't do, right? So having the frozen thing I can just pop out and put in the pot and reheat, like lentil soup or whatever. So that's one way to save some time. You can take that one step further and actually make some and give it away to a friend. Okay. And so you make enough for, if you're going to go through all the effort, operate in generosity. I love that in Latin America, where I grew up, and also in many cultures in Asia, and I have a lot of Korean friends, and they do the banchan, the side dishes. And so all the omas come together and they make the side dishes together and they all share it, right? And then sometimes anytime you go to their home, you're always walking away with a container of something that's fermenting or that they made. And so this whole component of community, that you might not have the time to make all this food, but if you're being generous, then someone else is going to be like, oh, I have something I made. I'm going to bring it over to you. And you start operating that way. Next thing you know, you're sharing the health, you're sharing the wellness. Um, and the third thing I would add to that is something I like to do with my daughters when we go to farmers markets is find the produce we've never eaten before. So what's the one thing we haven't tried yet? Let's try it. And so sometimes I'll have each of my daughters pick one thing they haven't tried before, and we bring it home. Sometimes we eat it raw, sometimes it needs to be cooked. And that's a fun way to make food that's good for you exciting, because I think a lot of times we overlook it. And most grocery stores only have your basic produce, unless you go to Whole Foods, sometimes they have some unique things. But the farmers markets are really, really fun, So that's one thing I would add. And then above all is like as Esther was saying, have fun with this. So because we have to eat at least 3 meals a day typically. We often snack in between. So it's a huge part of our life, and most family gatherings and friend gatherings and work gatherings revolve around food. So we might as well make it fun, and eating healthy is fun when you get into that lifestyle.
Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to Megan for all your support with Mind Myself, and all of the information for the practitioners has now been put in the chat. If you're watching this live, save the chat. If you're watching the recording, then you're on the event page already, hopefully, and you can just click on their listings link, and all of that information will be on their profiles on the Mind Myself website. And we encourage you, if you feel so inclined, you've resonated with somebody here today, then feel free to reach out to them. I know they're all working and doing coaching in various different ways. And Sarah is also an animal synergist. So if you have pets and you want to know information about that, reach out to her too. And let me just make sure I've got my notes. Yes, we have 3 more events coming up minimum this year for Mind Myself. The next one is on June 4th, and it's about energy medicine, the future of healing, energy modalities, and body field medicine. We don't have all of our practitioners yet, so you can't sign up for it yet. And then in September, the nervous system and safety. And then in December, regeneration and cellular renewal. So more juicy topics to come. There's also so much information on the website. Feel free to check out our podcasts, the blogs. And in closing, 2 quotes. The body knows things long before the mind catches up. And even if it's been squished out of us, I think that's still true. And that was by Rachel Naomi Remen. She's an MD, and it was from her book, My Grandfather's Blessings. Isn't that a great title for a book? And then finally, one of my favorite authors of all time, who I got to spend a week with once in Sorrento, Madeline L'Engle. She says in The Irrational Season from her Crosswicks journals, we are not meant to be fixed. We are meant to be met. So same on this food journey. It applies to all of it, body, mind, spirit. We're not meant to be fixed. We're meant to be met. Thank you for being here tonight, practitioners, all of you who are watching now, all of you who are watching on the recording. And we do this because you matter. Thank you.